Okay. Welcome everyone to Make Yourself Heard, how to fully use your voice and make an impact. This is our interview with Julie Fogh, who is the co-founder of Vital Voice Training. Before we get started, I'd like to cover some logistics. So first, we're recording the call. So if you want this after our interview, I can send it to you. It's also going to be on Facebook Live for the Work Bigger community only. So there is a slight delay there. So if you're watching this, make sure that you join through the Zoom link. We can still answer your questions. So definitely ask questions in the comments, but there will be a delay. And then feel free to share any questions or comments in the chat box or in the Q&A. Now, for those of you who are new to Work Bigger, I'm Delma McCaffrey, the CEO and the founder, and everything that we do here is about challenging the status quo and redefining work so that work is a vehicle for creativity and change. We do that in three ways. First, programming. We have a personalized, high-impact program that helps you find work you love and make a difference in the world without burning out, because that's very, very important. Second, community. We have a really engaged and close-knit group of ambitious women who have shared values around challenging the status quo and also raising our collective consciousness, which is what Work Bigger is all about. And then third, content. So we have a content platform where we share resources and articles on redefining work. And part of our content is the Work Bigger Story series, which is why Julie is here today. In Work Bigger Stories, we interview women who are changing the world and who are mission-driven. And they're doing this by either launching their own companies, aligning with other mission-driven organizations, or redefining work and creating a career on their own terms. Today, we're interviewing Julie Fogh, who is the co-founder of Vital Voice Training. And I'm going to give a brief bio about Julie, but Julie, I'm going to let you also talk about your background. Sure. In a minute. Julie is a certified associate teacher in Fitzmaurice Voice Work and has been an adjunct professor with Manhattanville College teaching voice and speech and acting. She founded Vital Voice Training with Casey Aaron Clark in 2014. We did an interview with Casey a couple weeks ago, so I hope you caught that, but if not, definitely check that out in our Facebook group or our YouTube channel. And Casey and Julie's mission is to create a new paradigm for effective communication and to start changing how we talk to each other, how we really listen, and how we collaborate to help everyone understand the power of their voice. So with that, welcome, Julie. I'm so excited to have you here today.
So excited to be here.
So why don't you start by just sharing a little bit about yourself, your background, and your work?
Sure. So I'm currently in San Francisco now. I had moved from San Francisco to Dekalb, Illinois for grad school, and then from there to New York City, where I've been the past 7 years. My background, I have an MFA in acting from Northern Illinois University. I've been an actor for many years, although my focus has switched to voice work, voice coaching, and that's really where I found my sweet spot in what I love the most about acting, which is kind of digging into character work and finding those sweet spots of what makes people shine. And really just, I love the digging in part.
Yeah, I love it. You said something, so we did an interview with you on the blog, and on the interview you talked about, I'm going to just look at it right here. You said that you find the role in you. It's not outside of you when it comes to that character work. And I thought that was really fascinating. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and how we can find the role in ourselves, even if we're not actors?
Oh, absolutely. The way we see ourselves is only one dimension of all that we have within us. And we know this because our interactions with our coworkers are different than with our friends and with our families. So we already know a small part of the palette that we have. What often happens is people think that this happens with communication, this happens with all kinds of things, that you have to find something outside of yourself to become something else in order to be what you want to be seen as. except for that thing already lives in you. So rather than looking outside, it's about digging in and finding where it already exists so it can be fed and grow. So with any role for a play that I'd be in, I'd have to find my way into the role. I'd have to find where that person, where that character, where that set of given circumstances lived in me in order to bring life to that character, as opposed to trying to make myself into something that wasn't authentic, that was outside of who I am.
Yeah. So I'm curious, does this apply, like when you've done acting work in the past, have you ever had to play a character that, maybe when reading the script, you didn't feel like it was really you? Was that ever the case? So then how did you work through that?
So the process of acting, so I'm trying to think of one of the most difficult roles. So I'll use Lady Macbeth as an example. That is not, I'm certainly not going to encourage my husband to go out and murder people so I can take over a country, but I can understand ambition, and I can understand wanting somebody to do something. I can understand the stakes being really high for that. So that's where I would go in and connect to play the part through that way. And it also takes imagination. What would I do under these given circumstances? If this were my stakes, how would I go about, we talk about obstacles in acting. So how would I approach this obstacle in an authentic way that I might not see myself as on a daily basis, but I think everyone can relate to a jealousy inside, or a strong ambition, or some of these things that we label as negative emotions. And as long as you're not scared of them, it doesn't mean that, I can't leave that role behind. I just get to play around in sort of the messy parts of myself, which is really fun.
Yeah. So finding the relatable traits, really, I'm hearing too, like working from a place of empathy and then leveraging that to find that character in you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about the voice aspects. One thing that I remember seeing in your interview too was that you're an introvert, right? So leveraging our voices, especially when we're introverts, can feel a little bit more difficult. So can you share a little bit, and maybe it's not directly connected, but how does that, like tapping into that inner you, connect to finding your voice and then using your voice?
Well, there's two sides to it. The first that I really like to start with is that being an introvert and being shy are two different things. They sometimes coexist, but they're not the same thing. Being an introvert really just means I get my energy recharged when I'm alone versus through other people. So making the separation between those things. It's the same thing, I think, as finding the character in you. Introverts have a really amazing gift of processing things deeply. Often one of the stronger suits of introverts is you'll think something through before you say it. Extroverts often are thinking as they're talking. So you end up having a more in-depth or fully formed understanding. So I think using those kinds of strengths is really important. And using your voice, I think the number one thing that comes up for us with introverts is networking can be really intimidating. Well, introverts are generally very good at one-on-one. So why not go into a networking event looking to make a connection with one person deeply that you're going to maintain, as opposed to feeling like you need to work the room? Do it in the way that feels good to you. And I think that there's a lot of magic in that. I know I've made my connections through networking events via finding one or two people to really connect with. And because sometimes I like to add as well, having an exit strategy as an introvert is a really important thing too. Because I think sometimes what holds us back from speaking up is, oh, what if I get caught in a conversation I can't get out of? So I like to have a couple of exit strategies just in my repertoire. I find I'm going to go find the ladies' room. Just as simple as that to be very effective, and knowing that you're allowed to walk away from a conversation when it's over.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. I actually, and if there are any introverts too who are listening, feel free to jump in. If you want to share your experience or your question, I think it's super important to just take this time to talk through it. I feel like I'm an extroverted introvert. I definitely fall into both areas, and I've definitely felt that as well. Like being at a networking event, it can feel really, really intense, especially when there's so many people, and then getting caught up in a conversation. I'm like, oh no, now I'm stuck here forever. How do I exit? So
Right.
yeah, I love the exit strategy tips. Can you share a little bit just about experiences where you've had, especially as an introvert, where maybe prior to that experience you weren't fully aware of the power of your voice, and then something happened to awaken you to that? And we talked a little bit about this on the blog too. I don't remember the story that, I don't know if you remember the story you shared, but it could be that or something else.
I think I do. I would say that acting helped me find my voice, and I'm really, really grateful for the training. Learning that voice was a physical, it's not just I have this single voice and that's the only voice I can use. My body is made to use my voice. So learning more about how that actually worked on a physical level was very helpful for me. The other thing was breaking through what I call breaking through the sound barrier. So in one of the voice classes I was working in, my voice teacher was sort of shifting on my hips, getting tension out, working especially in the chest area, and this giant voice just boomed out of me. And that's what I'm talking about, breaking the sound barrier, because suddenly I knew I had it, as opposed to how I used to speak, which was sort of putting my breath back in my throat and being a little bit more quiet. I learned I can use my breath to put my voice out, and I don't have to do any more effort, and I'm not afraid of the sound of my own voice anymore, because we've broken through. If that answers your question.
Yes. I have a couple of follow-up questions. Tell me, what is that feeling like when you are afraid of your own voice? I feel like a lot of people can probably relate to that.
I think that, first of all, we hear our voices differently inside our own heads, inside our own ears, than anyone else hears us. And for people that are used to being more on the quiet side, it can feel like, oh, I'm being so loud right now. Well, yeah, it's going to sound really loud to you because your ears are right there. So I think just kind of in some ways getting over that fear of I'm being too loud, which is a surprising concern for people who want to be louder. They don't want to be too loud. It's not really possible to be too loud. We monitor in space our communication. So I generally push people to be louder than they think they even need to be, just to practice what that is. And then there was a second part of your question. Remind me.
Yeah, no, I didn't ask it yet, but I do have a follow-up. Like, how do you feel like it has helped you finding your voice and being able to just speak up and show up?
It's life-changing. Getting out there and using your voice, even just, I think the showing up is really the key part. You're there. Now there's opportunities opening up. Everything happens in our world through networking, through meeting people, through relationships. Life happens that way. It doesn't happen if you're just sitting by yourself being afraid to go and say what you think. I think as I've gotten older, it's not just the acting that helped me learn how to use my voice, but I've also gotten a lot less shy about saying what I really think about things. And that's really freeing too. I worked in the hospitality industry for a very long time, so I can do the polite thing when I need to. Yeah. But I also find great pleasure in just making the point, saying what I mean.
Yeah, I feel like just thinking back to personal experience, I remember as a little girl, this is probably when I was maybe 5 or 6, just adults telling me, like, wait till you're spoken to, or, right,
I grew up like that too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like don't speak before your elders. And I think those comments were really harmless, but I feel like we internalize that kind of language, and making our point and showing up and speaking from a place of confidence. I think when we're internalizing things like that can be really, really difficult. What would you say, or, for women who are feeling like that? I know it's taken me too, like constant practice to be more direct and to let go of that fear that I felt around speaking up. Because for me, it has been like, oh, I don't want to be rude. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be too loud, but not in the sense that I'm afraid of my own voice, in the sense that I'm too much or I'm speaking out of term. And I've hated that feeling. Like I feel like, or I've sensed really how it's held me back in the past. Mm-hmm. So for women who are, just going through that now and trying to navigate that internal struggle is what I would call it. Like, what tips or advice or like anything, I guess, what do you think could be helpful in that mental space?
I think I heard something interesting at a conference I was at a couple weeks ago, which is someone can't give you power. You have the power, which goes in line with how I believe that it already exists in you, because if they can give you power, they can take it away, but you already have that power. I think this confidence is already there. The practice is really important. I also think just knowing that you deserve to take up time, space, and your ideas deserve to be put out there is the most important. That courage takes time to develop. And like you said, practice. Do the scary thing. Open your mouth and speak. We oftentimes as women and as introverts especially think, okay, I want to hold space for everyone else. Well, that's not going to serve people when they're losing out on your ideas that you're not sharing with them. So in some ways, I try and reframe that for people as it's more of a selfish act not to speak up. And when you do speak up, you give people permission also to speak up. And I think that's, if your motivation is, I really want to empower others, then speaking up is one of the best examples that you can give.
Yeah, to me, I feel like it's about finding that connection to yourself where you really value yourself and your work and your voice and the work that you're putting out there. So yeah. I completely agree with you. It's connecting to that bigger, deeper part, maybe, is the way I would say it.
And your ideas are important and deserve to be part of the conversation. Mm-hmm. Just hands down. That's the baseline of all of this, is that you start from a place of knowing you deserve to speak.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I love it. I want to change a little bit direction. You talked about in the blog going to Russia. So yeah. We're changing a little bit here, but I'm curious to hear about that experience. What was that like?
So I went to the Moscow Art Theater for a month to study acting with my graduate school class. So we were there the month of June. It was beautiful. I highly recommend Moscow in June. I think the experience that I had there was, in terms of, I talked about this in the blog, in terms of the way that the actors related to the craft, it was so deep and passionate and important. The theater is still very important there. The actors that perform at the Moscow Art Theater are national treasures. And that expression, that ability to again, not be afraid of the dark places or the passionate places or all of that juicy stuff that makes us human, is something that the Russian actors dive into. There's also a great deal of discipline in the training. That's physical discipline. I would watch some of the students, doing sit-ups out in the hallway. There's acrobat classes. Physical strength is considered really important as an actor, a responsive body. So that watching that training is, I think, American acting, not my program. My program was definitely not light. But I think a lot of times American acting training, we think it's making us as big as something you might see on TV. And I love my fair share of superficial shows. I'm not gonna lie. I've got a thing for Marvel Comics shows.
I love it. My husband makes me watch all of them.
Yeah. It's definitely a male in my life that got me into them. But the Russians, and that's, I mentioned specifically Chekhov. The reason why Chekhov is considered a comedic writer is because the Russians are kind of, the depression and the despair is already there. That's already part of it. Yeah. It's what people do with that on top of it that's what makes it funny. And I think Chekhov wrote a lot of almost exaggerated angst and trauma because Russians find that funny. They do find humor in suffering. There is humor in suffering sometimes, especially when someone gets too entangled in their own suffering.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and then the other part was just the Russian people that I met. It's not a country where people are smiling at you or going to say, hello, how's your day, or anything like that. And it's not really a country of smiling at all. But you know, when you connect with a Russian person, or at least in my experience, they're the people that will show up for you. They're the people that are, it's actions before words in how those relationships are developed.
Amazing. Have you taken any of those learnings into your work now?
Yeah, I think I now don't, it's part of the introvert thing in going to networking. I now realize I don't have to smile and make small talk. I can make a connection on my terms, in my way. So I think I brought that back with me. Also much more respect for the physical body and how we live in such a narrow range in the US, both vocally and in how we move in space. Mm-hmm. It helped me open up and be able to explore the space that I could take up, or different rhythms that one can use, whether you're playing a character or you need to make a certain effect in a speech you're giving. So I would say those things are, that's where they finally came together for me.
Yeah. So keeping on to the experiences, because I think they're so critical, whatever the experience is, whether it's traumatic or whether it's a really positive experience like you had in Russia, I think they're so key in connecting us to our work on a deeper level, which is, really why we're here and really why Work Bigger also exists. It's about doing work that you feel deeply connected to so that you can go out and make an impact, and you can step out of your comfort zone and push through those roadblocks that we have, especially when it comes to using our voices and feeling confident. Can you think back to any experiences that you feel was really pivotal in helping connect you to your work, and also just transitioning from an actor to a trainer with voice? Like, can you recall what that experience was that helped you make that transition?
Well, I'm trying to think of the moment of transition. For me, when I finally discovered the pleasure in some of this, instead of this has to be hard work, and started incorporating, what am I curious about in this? Can this be playful? Does this have to be so serious and important? Where can I find joy in even very difficult things? And that's not to say forced positivity or anything like that. But like I was saying, there's a pleasure in playing Lady Macbeth when getting to explore those dark sides. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that I think that we find terrifying, that if we just look at what am I curious about, what do I want to follow, what do I want to pursue, takes away that wall that we put up for ourselves. And for me, the transition to coaching, I was coaching a lot of my co-classmates when I was in grad school, and I really loved it, and I was able to articulate things to them. Oh, I get it now. And then I started teaching at Manhattanville, teaching undergrads, and just really loved being able to translate information and figure out what each person needed to hear in order to understand what we were studying and how specific that was to each individual. And that's one of the reasons I love one-on-one coaching so much, is finding out, okay, every time we work together, you teach me how to better teach you. And I love that. It's a lot like doing character research work, which was my favorite part of acting school anyway. I never so much loved being on stage. I don't hate being on stage, but I never had dreams of carrying a bouquet of flowers and applause and all of that. It really was the work that I loved.
Yeah.
And then on top of that it's useful to helping women get to use their voices and get out and do these really kick-ass things. Our clients are phenomenal. And that I have a part in connecting synapses that are getting them confident to get out and share their message with the world you can see I get really, really excited about it. And I feel so privileged to be able to do that. And to have a skill set, which I didn't know the world needed until I just started working with it.
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, for that same story that I shared before, I think we really need to tap into that deeper part of ourselves to get our messages out there. Just curious, like, who are some of the clients that you worked with? I know you worked with Jenna. She just did her TED Talk.
She's awesome.
Yeah. And for those who are new, Jenna Boer is the founder of Babies on the Brain, and she just did her TED Talk, and she's also in the Work Bigger community, and we did an interview with her. She was one of the first Facebook Live interviews that we did, but she's amazing. So, Julie, I'll let you share who else you work with.
Hold on. Let me just get
Did you lose us?
I didn't lose you, but my Google Calendar decided it was time to tell me something. Okay.
No worries.
I'm coming back. Where are you? Close you, Google Calendar.
While Julie is trying to adjust her calendar, if there are any questions or comments, we would both love to hear from everyone. We always leave some time in the end for Q&A, but yeah, feel free to share whether you're on Facebook Live. Facebook Live is working well. And then, if you're on the Zoom call, just feel free to share anything. But yeah, Julie, tell us. So who are some of the clients that you worked with? What kind of work do they do?
We've been doing a lot more helping people prepare speeches. So and some people's names I can use, and some people I can just talk about the kinds of work that we do, because confidentiality is really important.
Totally.
One of our favorite clients, who everyone should know about, Carrie Goldberg. She is a lawyer who is leading the charge on getting law up to date with online harassment. So we got to help her prepare her speech to speak in front of Congress about starting to create legislation that will deal with online bullying and all of the things that the police don't have an option for right now, but it seems to be becoming more and more pervasive. So she is... support her. She's awesome. We've worked with a few people that have done TEDx talks. One of our clients did South by South lawn, so got to speak on soft robotics in front of the White House last November. Another one of our clients did an actual South by Southwest talk that we got to help her prepare for. And then other clients are just looking at how can I be more effective communicating in the workplace? How can I speak up more in meetings? How can I present myself with more gravitas? Prepare for an interview, that sort of thing. So it's all the same roots, but very different expressions, because it depends on the individual and also their communication goals.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. That sounds incredible. I love the mission behind a lot of your clients and the work they're doing.
Yeah, we've attracted just some really awesome people, and we work with men as well. A lot of ESL men who have come to us because people aren't understanding them, or they think that my accent's getting in the way of getting promoted. And as always, I come from the perspective, as long as you can be understood, your accent is fine. So we can work on how can you maybe tweak some small things. You might be missing, I'm sort of going on a tangent here, but in every language, there's a song. There's a song of how it sounds, which is why you can often tell. I can usually hear when an Australian or a Brit is doing an American accent, just because the song is just a little bit off. And very often an ESL speaker doesn't know the song of the language, but that's what we listen for just as much as we do the words. So their vocabulary and pronunciation could be completely impeccable, but without that extra, what our American ears listening for, their voices are getting lost and their message is getting lost.
That's fascinating. I don't know if I'd mentioned this to you, so I talk about this quite a bit. I was born in Albania, and I came here when I was 8. But I don't have an accent because I came here when I was so young, so no one knows. But all of my family members have accents, and I feel like it's such a challenge when you go out in the workplace and you're trying to show up. I think just what I've seen from my family members is it just could impact their confidence pretty significantly. So what do you teach them? Like how to find that song and to speak from that place?
Yeah, which weirdly enough goes back to high school English punctuation. It's teaching people what we listen for rhetorically, in sentence structure, in landing a period, in where to put a comma, in how to build lists. So for example, I go to the grocery store and I'm not just buying milk, eggs, and avocado. I'm buying milk, I'm buying eggs, and I'm buying avocado. And those things all have their own identity and life in them. So once you can connect those two, which I often, when I'm working with ESL speakers, will have them do a piece in their native language and in English so they can remember that they already know how to do those things. We're now just translating it into English. I think as far as going out and having an accent, I think that they are beautiful. I think anyone who doesn't take the time to take the 5 seconds to recalibrate, oh, this person has an accent, that doesn't mean they're stupid. It's baffling to me how little Americans are. I would say there's a real lack of generosity in listening just a tiny bit more closely. And that's part of the global stuff that Casey and I want to work on changing as well.
Oh, that's amazing. I have a couple more questions, and then I would love to hear from everyone who's listening. First, you mentioned speaking up in meetings. So I know that comes up a lot with the women in our community. How can, as women, what can we do to speak up in meetings and feel, speak up from a place of confidence and strength?
Well, the first thing I like to talk about is there's something that we all do occasionally, which is this little catch breath, which tries to indicate I want to speak. Don't do that. Take a full breath.
Yeah.
Speak. And if you're interrupting, you can say, I'm going to interrupt you right here. I often find women don't want to interrupt. And that can sometimes in meetings, especially if it's your agenda and somebody's taking off on their own agenda, you got to be able to reel that back in and to know that you have the right to say, we're getting a little off topic, let's get back to that, and not be rude about it. Mm-hmm. You can do that, and you can do that without starting with, I'm sorry, but I'm going to interrupt you. I actually don't have a problem with I'm sorry. I think sometimes it's a function of politeness. I think it's cultural. I think blaming women for saying sorry when women get blamed for not saying sorry is all of the contra. Me, the voice coach, who's losing my words.
No, but we talked about this with Casey too. She said when you place certain restrictions around, like, don't say just, right? Or don't say I'm sorry, it just makes us hesitate even more.
Exactly. You can follow all the advice, but because the advice is so contradictory, you can back yourself into a corner. So don't upspeak leads sometimes to vocal fry. Saying I'm sorry can be a way to soften somebody that's necessary for the moment. You can also jump in and interrupt without the I'm sorry. And I think that's really important. And I think the flip side of that is if somebody interrupts you, being able to say, you've just interrupted me, I'm going to finish my point, we'll get right back to you, or whatever script you want to write that allows you to address that in the moment, instead of, I've been interrupted, okay, now I have to sit with this. No, you don't. You don't. If somebody interrupts you, you can jump right back in. I think that's just, again, back to this, you have the right to speak. You have the right.
Don't hesitate.
Don't hesitate. And don't make yourself feel bad if you don't speak up in a meeting, or if don't punish yourself and add on that extra level of shame. I think as meeting culture, I always say starting at the top with setting the rules for the meeting with whoever is in charge of the moderating, whether or not interruptions will be allowed, or setting a set of rules for meetings is a great top place to start. But I also think if interrupting is happening, jump in, join the game. Again, what's fun about it? What's fun about interrupting?
Yeah, I love the, don't beat yourself up. That's something I used to do early in my career. I used to think, especially when I was in a room with all men, where I would feel just, probably more intimidated. I would say to myself, like, shit, like it's been 30 minutes and I haven't contributed to the conversation, and now this is reflecting badly on me. And I think stopping that conversation in our heads is so important, because it's not productive. And what's the point of making ourselves feel bad?
Exactly. And one more thing I wanted to say that I think is really important, and I think Casey probably said this in her interview as well. If you can't stand up for yourself in a meeting quite yet, because you're still learning or practicing, you're probably good at advocating for other people. So to do the thing like they talked about in the Obama administration, Sally made a great point there. Sally, can you say that again? Or that's, let's make space. It looks like you just interrupted her. I'd really like to hear what she has to say. Go ahead and finish. Amplifying each other and starting to create that positive culture, I think, is really what's going to change the culture at large.
Oh, that's so powerful, because I think as women, advocating for others is often easier than for ourselves. So
right.
I agree. Thank you so much. I will ask one more question and then we'll pass it on to everyone else. And I know you also have to jump off at once, so I don't want to keep you too long. But yeah, for women in our community, there's a lot of women who are in transition. Many of them haven't yet figured out what it is they want to do, and really what their ideal career looks like. Is it launching a freelance career? Is it transitioning to a new 9-to-5? Is it starting their own business? So what advice do you have for women who are in that transition period and they're still trying to figure out where they should be with their work?
You're always going to be trying to figure out where you want to be in your work. The worst thing you can do is try and sit and wait until the perfect thing comes to you to act. I heard something years ago that really stuck with me, is just because you put something on the table doesn't mean it has to stay there forever. So I say we learn the most by doing. So try it, try different things, experiment. How does this feel? Does this fit? The odds that you will come up with your ideal career just by thinking through it and not based on your life experiences coming together are very slim, and usually lead to, I think, where people do get stuck.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Julie. What questions do we have? I'm going to check Facebook Live right now, and then all of the ladies who are on Zoom would love to hear your comments, your thoughts. If you're on Facebook Live, give us a like or a love, and feel free to share a question. There is a bit of a delay, but it looks like it's working great. So okay, and if there are no questions, Julie, How can everyone find you? I have your website and everything, and I'll make sure to share that with everyone, but would love to hear from you how everyone can reach out or find you and all that good stuff.
Yeah, our website is vitalvoicetraining.com. And I say training specifically because there's also an organization called Vital Voices, which is not us. And then email us at hello@vitalvoicetraining.com. We love emails. We also do 15-minute complimentary consultations if you've just got a question or want to get to talk to us or know us better. We love to hear from you all.
Perfect. I shared all of this in the Zoom comments in the chat box. I'll also share it on our Facebook Live. And real quick, because I see, I think we have some new women on in the Zoom call. So if you are not part of the Work Bigger community, I would love for you to join. We do more interviews like this, like with Julie, with other women, because my goal is to help you all connect with these incredible women like Julie who are doing such important work. So if you are not part of the community, I'd love for you to join. Just go on Facebook and then groups Work Bigger. I'll share that in the chat here as well. And then we are curating the group and really vetting it because my goal is to create a safe space for everyone who's involved. And we also want to make sure that you value community and that you value these resources. So I'm really grateful to Julie for your time and just sharing all of this valuable insight and expertise. And I can sense your passion too for all the work that you're doing. I think it's incredibly important, and just want to thank you so much for taking this time to speak to our group.
Well, thank you for putting this group together. I think it's such an amazing way to get women together connecting. I mean, this is, again, one of the ways of introverts being able to network is groups like this. So
thank you. And if I can keep you for one more minute, because I'm seeing some questions coming in through Facebook Live. Juliet says, in terms of gaining confidence in networking professional space, what is Julie's opinion on signing up for an improv class? Does she have any recommendation or helpful activities?
I don't, there's a lot of speech coaches or old articles that I think recommend take an improv class. Improv's fun. I don't know that it necessarily is the key to unlocking confidence for everybody. I think that it goes back to this idea of play and of saying whatever comes to the top of your mind. That's also one of the hardest parts of improv is you have no time to think, you just have to talk.
Yeah.
So for people that want practice with that, I think that is a good idea. You want to choose your improv classes pretty carefully. I know in New York, there's, it's Amy Polo's improv group.
I know what you're talking about, and it's like escaping me too.
It's totally escaping me. It's in Chelsea. I can't remember, but I've heard good things about their
Second
classes.
City. Second City. Is that it?
Not Second City.
Oh.
It might be Upright Citizens Brigade.
That's okay. That one I've heard of. Thank you, Stephanie. Stephanie suggested Second City.
Second City is definitely one. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Yeah, Juliet, I'm so glad you asked that question. I used to think about taking improv classes all the time too, because I used to have trouble speaking on my feet. It was a big fear of mine. So Julie, I'm really glad that you're calling out the difference between like learning to speak on your toes, but then leveraging your voice, right? And just boosting confidence. I think that can happen in a number of ways, right? So yeah, I think that's really cool. Let's see. There's one more question from Laura. Hi, Laura. So good to see you on here. She said, I love the reframing from me to my audience. I have confidence in my ideas, but I've always had a soft, low voice and would love to learn how to get the volume up. I might not be able, she's not going to be able to stay till the end, but she would love to hear. Yeah, Laura and I have actually talked about this before because she mentioned too to me a while back that she's surrounded by other people who, like her family members, who are louder. So like when we have a more quiet voice, like you talked about breathing, is there anything else that comes to mind and, you know, helping with that?
Breathing breath is your gas pedal for volume. So oftentimes I think we think to be louder, I need to use more of my vocal cords. I need to put in a whole bunch of effort. That sounds horrible. So if I add just a bit more breath to what I'm saying, and I mean, I'm talking like totally risking spitting on people kind of thing, my voice gets louder and my voice gets more full just by that breath. And I'm not actually putting any more stress on my vocal cords than if I'm speaking to you just at this volume right here. Remembering that and remembering that our voices they aren't just right here. It's your resonators, it's your whole body, it's taking space in your body that allows you to really speak. So when I talk to people about speaking louder, I always take louder off the table. Land your breath further away. Sort of like when if you've ever taken boxing or any sort of punching thing, they say punch through. Breathe through. Breathe past the person because we speak on an exhale, so you can exhale that out. And that's the little trick that I have for instantly getting more volume.
Amazing. And don't be afraid if you spit on anyone the first time, because you'll be able to figure it out as you go, right?
You can practice on your own too, in the shower or the car or whatever.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm going to see, are there any more questions from anyone before we jump off? Okay, well, if there are any follow-up questions, Julie, is it okay if we reach out to you? Sometimes that happens with our Facebook Live.
Absolutely. You can hit us we have a Facebook page. Vital Voice is on Facebook as well. Perfect. Email us. Totally happy to answer questions.
Awesome. Thank you again. You are amazing. I'm so happy to just, be able to share your work with our community, and just thank you again for everything. It's been such a pleasure connecting with you.
Thank you, Velma. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for everyone who watched.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye, Julie.
Bye.